Hey, it's Josh Brown. We are live from the compound for an all-new episode of Talk Your Book with my friend Allison Schrager. Allison, say hello.
Hello.
Okay. Allison's book is blowing up right now. We're only days away from the launch of An Economist Walks Into a Brothel. Did I say that right?
Yep.
Okay. We're not going to talk about brothels, but we are going to talk about some of the everyday economics lessons that everyone can learn from some of the strangest, I would say, anecdotes and stories that you've ever read in a book of this sort. You're going to love it. Stick around. Okay, so Allison, first things first. I love the cover. I love the art. Did you design any of this, or you just kind of approved it?
I take no credit.
You take no. Okay.
No blame. I take no credit.
I publish books. I didn't have that much say either. But let's get into like the idea behind the book, which I'm going to tell it to you, and you tell me if I'm right or wrong. I feel like you have this really incredible breadth of expertise about economics, but it's so boring to have an economics conversation. So instead of that, you go find all these people that are exhibiting traits that are classic economic ideas, and you tell their stories and why you can pull some investing lessons out of that. So I think like you're talking about Hollywood, you're talking about surfing, you're talking about horse breeding, and what are the lessons? Like, was that the original idea, and did it come out exactly like you thought it would?
It did. My idea was this, because I have a background in academia, I worked in finance, and I'd worked in journalism, and it dawned on me that...
You have a PhD?
Yes.
You're going to drop that. It's all right.
I didn't.
All right.
It's cooler if you're just like, I have a background.
I have one too. It's okay. Go ahead.
I was thinking specifically like I wanted to bring financial economics, which is a discipline within economics, more to the front, because you hear a lot about macro, you hear about applied micro, which is like what Freakonomics is.
Right.
But I feel like financial economics had implications beyond financial markets.
Financial economics is investing, insurance, portfolio management?
It's the study of risk in financial markets.
Okay.
And the other thought I had was that any economic model, financial model or macro model, is really effectively a parable, right? Because what are parables? But they're just these little abstractions of how the world works to teach people a broader lesson. And that's
Right.
what a model is.
So, I think like this book is a direct descendant of like Adam Smith. Like that's what he was doing. He was talking about merchants and he was talking, but from those parables, he was explaining how money moves or how people make financial decisions.
Exactly, because parables are great storytelling. It's how people connect and relate to things. So I figured I could find characters who illustrate these concepts.
So, all right, let's get into some of the characters because I'm reading the book for the second time now. I read it when it was a manuscript, and now I'm like halfway through my second go-round. And like some of these chapters are just amazing. Like they're standalone. They're so great. I want to talk about the Hollywood chapter. Somebody came along and convinced people that put money behind Hollywood movies that they could come up with factors that would ensure a better portfolio of things to back. Like, I don't know what they were using, like the directors or the theme or whatever. Like, tell me about how you found that story and what it's about.
So I spoke to a lot of people in the movie industry because I was looking for something, risk measurement. What's immeasurable?
Right.
Movie risk, because a quote you recently said that, as William Goldman said, no one knows anything.
Nobody, like you have no way of knowing. No matter how much money you spend or what star you sign, you just can't tell you're going to have a hit.
Yeah, because as you know in finance, some risks are easier to measure than others.
Right.
And I was looking for something that's hard to measure. And so I started talking to people in the movie industry, and they told me about this guy, Ryan Kavanaugh. And this was when his whole scheme was just blowing up. And that...
It's about 10 years ago?
Yeah, well, it started then where he had a Monte Carlo simulation, which is what we use in finance all the time, to try to predict what movies were going to make money. And like anything, like a lot of models, at first it looked great, did some back testing.
Back tests look good in Hollywood too.
Yeah.
Right.
But after a while, it fell apart because they all do, because the problem with the movie industry is the data is always changing.
Right.
And the profit models are so skewed. It gets really just a complete crapshoot. They're so hard to predict that eventually his model failed.
Right. So, and he was doing mostly smaller films. So, which I would argue it sounds like it would be harder. Like I feel like if you spend a lot of money, you have a lot of risk, but also you can get a lot of marketing and If you're trying to do a slate of indie films, doesn't that seem like it would intuitively be harder?
It is. It is harder. And if you look at what I did is I got all this movie data and plotted the sort of risk distribution.
Right.
And we always think of horror movies now because we always see things like You, and they're coming out, and everyone or us, and they seem like, oh, this was a sure bet. But actually,
Right.
if you look at the profit distribution for horror and indie films, it's just a complete crapshoot. There's really no pattern you can discern from it. As opposed to action movies, which are bigger budget,
Right.
they're fairly predictable in how they're going to do.
You were saying action movies have twice the potential of breaking even or earning money above.
I believe so.
But a horror movie, if it is a hit, could be a much bigger outlier to the upside, or
exactly,
okay.
and the return on investment can be huge. Because
Okay.
horror movies are relatively cheap to make,
Okay.
but when they hit big.
Okay, so Ryan's scheme didn't exactly work. People put a lot of money in based on these factors, the simulation, and then when the actual movies came out, they were terrible movies. Nobody went.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe that'll be the end of that, or somebody 10 years later will come along.
Probably less than that. I mean, when you look into the history of the movie industry and the financial industry and their overlap, it's like every 5 years someone pushes a new model.
Okay, now you talk about the difference between hedging and insurance, and I thought that was really interesting from one chapter to another. Tell me about hedging and the idea that you use to represent that in the book.
So hedging is risk management. So what you're doing is you're just taking less upside, and in exchange you get rid of downside.
You're accepting less upside, and as a result, you can lose less.
Exactly.
So that's an okay trade-off for most people.
Yeah,
in most cases.
It's just taking less risk.
Right.
And the example, I had two examples for that. One is Arnold Donald, the CEO of Carnival.
Cruise line.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I thought it was an interesting story because he's incredibly cautious, and we always talk about the CEOs who charged ahead and took risk blindly. But really the CEOs who have longevity are the ones who hedge.
How long has he been in the CEO of Carnival?
I think like 5-6 years.
Okay.
Before that, he was at Monsanto.
Okay.
But he has a fascinating story. He grew up in poverty in New Orleans and just had this very slow, steady, meteoric climb. The other example I talked about was David Bowie, who turns out, I don't think a lot of people know this about him, was a really brilliant risk tactician. So when he was young, like 18 years old, and the music industry came to him, they said, well, you can, we'll give you a big advance and we own all your royalties. And he's like, no, I'll take a smaller advance.
But I want more later.
Exactly, which is
Okay.
taking a risk on yourself, because most people don't make it in the music industry. The royalties
Right.
is all you got. So he took it like a negative hedge. He took more risk.
Okay.
Then
Yeah,
when-
he leveraged what he thought he would earn in the future. Maybe
Yeah.
leverage not the right term, but
Yeah, exactly. He took more risk then. Instead of letting the...
it's funny. Like when I was hiring financial brokers in another life, we would talk about we would have salary negotiations, and I was always more excited about the people that said, "Give me less guaranteed and more potential upside a year from now."
Yeah.
Like that. Like those were the people that worked. Those are
those are
the
the-
type A and
Exactly, that's
Okay.
what he did. But what's interesting is when he was in his 40s or 50s, he took the opposite bet, and he securitized his royalties. And he could do that because he owned them from when he took the risk when he was
I
younger.
almost feel like that was like a part financial decision, but it was part almost performance art. And now I shall turn myself into money. Like he turned his catalog into a bond. He said, okay, it's very unlikely that I'm going to write all these new songs that are going to be as big as the old songs. So let me put the whole thing into a bond, and there'll be an interest payment, but I'll get all the cash today.
Well, also streaming was starting, and he was worried about that.
Was he?
Yeah, so
so brilliant.
So he was like, it was like Napster time. This was early. So Napster.
So stolen streaming.
Yeah, so
which is
he
even worse.
like, my royalties aren't going to be worth much at all.
Okay.
I may as well securitize
All
them.
right, so that's hedging, and then insurance is different from hedging. How? Just generally speaking.
Well, with insurance, what you do is you keep the upside, but you pay someone to get rid of your downside.
So it's not the same thing.
No.
Insurance is different from hedging in that what you're really trying to do is offlay risk, but not give up upside.
Exactly. You have to pay, a premium if you buy an option or an insurance contract, but after that, the upside is all yours.
So what's the example that you use to illustrate that idea?
Well, this is sound a little strange, but I talked to a magician,
Okay.
and I talked to her about all the ways she insures against a risk failing.
Like sawing somebody in half and they actually die, or what are we talking about?
Or just the way she manipulates the audience.
Okay.
So they trust her.
What's her risk that somebody sees sees through the charade.
Or she just does a trick like she can't find the card.
She blows a trick live.
It happens all the time. And the reason why I talked to a magician is Robert Merton, who solved Black Scholes, this sort of famous insurance pricing model.
Ben, she's still name dropping. I don't know if we want to edit that out. All right, go ahead. 10% of the audience will know Robert Merton, but in this office we revere Merton. Go ahead.
Well, he's the one who gave us the price that we all use for insurance prices. His father, who was also a famous sociologist, he became a sociologist because a career as a professional magician did not work out.
Okay. Oh, really?
Yeah.
So pivot to option pricing strategy?
Pivot to sociology.
Sociology?
He came up with a self-fulfilling prophecy with unintended consequence.
Okay.
Because magic didn't work out.
How does the magician, are we giving away too much of the book? How does the magician figure out how to insure against the risk of a bad trick?
She builds up trust in the audience.
So they'll laugh it off if it happens?
They don't notice because they're so attuned to how she can distract them.
Oh, it's so killer.
Yeah.
All right. Any other chapters that we should just mention that people should get excited to read?
Surfing.
I love them all. But
thank you.
You love the surfing chapter.
I love the surfing chapter.
Do you think that's going to be the big one for everyone?
I don't know. I like to think. What I love is when I talk to people and they all connect with a different chapter.
Okay.
Maybe I love the surfing because I got to go to Hawaii.
Okay.
That might just be.
So you have memories. You have the experience of writing it that kind of colors your.
I got to hang out with these surfers in Hawaii. It was just.
Now these are not regular surfers. These are the people that are paddling out to 100-foot waves.
Yeah.
Like waves that look like they're fake.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what's the concept that you were illustrating there?
Systemic risk.
Wow. Okay. I would say that's a pretty big one.
Yeah. So they have an annual risk conference to talk about risk because when they take big risks, they pose risks to others. And certain technology allows them to lever up. And they are talking about how to be more responsible.
The surfers?
Yeah.
Like what risks?
So
how do they risk each other's life? Like hitting someone with your board?
Yeah, or if you wipe out, that takes resources. You have to be rescued. People put themselves in the line when they rescue you.
Oh, and so then the next person that's out there doing this foolish thing can't get saved.
Mm-hmm. And so if you can get a jet ski to push you on a wave you have no business surfing. You wipe out, and someone else doesn't have someone.
The jet ski isn't there to pull them to safety.
Well, that's what's interesting about jet skis. Is they're both hedging and insurance. What's fascinating about them is they can help reduce your risk, but you can also flip them both upside down and take more risk. That's what leverage is. Leverage is a negative hedge.
Okay, so here's what I want to tell you. This should be a Netflix show. Each chapter is an episode. There should be a season. You agree with?
We're talking to a production company about it.
Okay, good. All right, let's not blow that. But listen, this is the book. This is the book. This is the one that everyone's going to be talking about this summer. This is the pop science, finance, economics book. You're going to be famous when this is over. Are you going to come back?
Of course.
You promise?
Of course.
Okay. All right, listen. Allison Schrager, buy this book. You're going to love it. It's so much fun to read. You will learn so much no matter what level of investing you're at. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.